I'll get started in just a couple minutes. See if anybody else wants to join in. If you'd like to chat me in the comments, I do have those up and I have a second screen, so I'll be able to see those throughout the lecture if you have any questions or if you just want to say hi while we're waiting. We'll get started at 6:03 on my, whenever that happens on my clock down here. All right. So welcome to your first live lecture for Character Animation 1. We're going to go ahead and dive into a day in the life of an animator. Sorry if you hear the fire engine that's outside. I live right next to a fire department. All right, let's see. First, we're going to do a quick review of what you learned in CAN 101. You found that character animation is the keyframed movement of characters to tell a story. It's artistically heavy. You should study timing and biomechanics. Excuse me. Biomechanics is the study of movement of a living body, including how muscles, bones, tendons, and ligaments work together to produce movement. So you would essentially be studying the movement of people and animals. The primary software you'd be using is Maya. Having additional knowledge in character rigging or setup could be useful, especially if you're having your character hold something as you would constrain the object to the hand. Storyboard and animatics are also a beneficial skill set, as you would need to be able to plan out your scene. Hey Abel, this is AV 240 Character Animation 1. At 7 p.m. we start the AV 260 Character Animation 2 lecture. But if you want to hang out, have at it. I'm going over a day in the life of an animator. Alright, so now let's get even further into what an animator actually does. An animator breathes life into a character. By Abel. Okay, an animator breathes life into a character. They bring objects to life through movement using the 12 basic principles of animation, which, as we know, are squash and stretch, anticipation, staging, straight ahead action, and pose to pose, straight ahead action and pose to pose, follow through and overlapping action, slow in and slow out, arc, secondary action, timing, exaggeration, solid drawing, and peel. So we'll go over several of the principles of animation throughout the course. On the final project that you have, it's a review of the course, and you'll be going over 4 principles that you learn. So throughout the course, kind of take note of some of the principles that I point out. Especially, you'll be graded on some of them throughout your assignments. And specifically, appeal will be in week 3 when you do your appealing walk. So through the use of these principles, it's the animator's job to make the audience forget that these 3D objects aren't real and to help the audience feel something for the object or character. In order to make the characters come to life and give them believable actions and stories, an animator studies real life. They study the posture of people, their quirks, their movements, and how someone talks. If you want to become an animator, the more that you animate and try to create believable performances for your characters, the more you'll find yourself studying people and observing events that happen in your day-to-day. A great way to study body mechanics and people is to create reference or find reference. So I found this great clip about reference videos and their importance by a supervising animator at Blue Sky Studios that we'll go ahead and watch. Let me see if I can turn it up. Whoops. Let me pause this. Oh my goodness. Sorry, guys. Okay. I was trying to get back and I went all over the place. All right, there we go. That's what I want. All right. It's always fun doing a live lecture. You never know what's going to happen. All right, so basically what I wanted you to take from this clip is the importance of reference and giving the director choices. You can rely on your peers to help you with your reference. So the part of the screen on the left, as you can see, has a paused video up. And the guy in the gray shirt is actually the animator, and the guy in the green shirt is his friend, and he just asked him to help create the reference. He felt like he would be better suited for that character. So you'll create your own reference, but there may be someone that can better bring your character to life than you can. So you can rely on a peer to help give you the reference you need to bring your animation performance to life. You can also find reference online. For example, I'm working on an animation with a little girl that loves soccer, but the clip that I have is a straight-on view without much action. Animating the facial expressions and lips will be easy, but I need to seek out more reference if I want to push the animation. I had a very specific idea of the child kicking a ball before the actual video occurs, so I scoured for exactly what I was looking for and trimmed the clip so I can easily have a visual of how a child kicking a ball would look. They wouldn't have the same balance and coordination that an adult would, so I would need to find that kind of reference. And this is why it's important to study body mechanics for your shots. You need to understand who your character is. Is it a child? Is it an adult? What are their, like I said here, I'm going to be focusing on she's not going to have as much coordination as an adult would. So Melvin goes into the importance of giving the director choices. You'll have a breakdown of what's happening in a scene and a storyboard, but it's up to you on how you'll bring this to life. The director has the vision for the entire film, so they'll give you direction and feedback if your choices integrate within the film or they don't. You'll need to step back and be able to take feedback and continue to edit your scene, even if you believe it to be perfect. All right, so I don't know why this is, there we go. So changes happen often in animation. You'll need to care about your scene and characters, but you'll also need to detach yourself from them. And now we can finally move on to the next side that I keep clicking on. Okay, here we go. So we'll be teaching you the software program Maya, but every large company has their own proprietary software. They'll train you in their software. Even in a small studio, you might work in a different 3D program. Just having the knowledge of how to animate, how to work in 3D space, and the general understanding of the tools you need to use will allow you to be successful. Blocking pass is a rough out of the animation or the key poses. You're getting the timing figured out within the pass and the main actions. You'll continue to refine the animation until it's a polished scene. In a lip sync, you'll play back the sound over and over to match the action and lips to the beats of what's being said. Okay, animators look at the very tiny details or nuances within the performances of their characters to make them feel believable. Bringing life to realistic characters is more difficult than bringing life to unrealistic or cartoony characters. We watch people every day and we read their expressions, body language, and gestures to understand what they're trying to tell us. We even see blinks and tiny expressions within the turn of a lip or a scrunch of an eyebrow. So that's why it's most difficult to animate realistic human characters. You can see on the right of the screen, the animator has the graph editor up as they're working, and this is a tool to help you get a more polished scene and allow you to make minor tweaks and major tweaks to your animations. We'll learn this in this class, and we'll be using it throughout the class. You start at the end of week 1 getting familiar with the graph editor, and then we just kind of build on that information throughout the course. So a common meeting that an animator takes part in is a daily. And I'll read through what dailies at Pixar look like, and I have an example clip on the next slide. When in production, there's dailies in the morning, show work to the director and the leads and fellow animators. Anybody can make comments, and you get notes on your work. Back to your desk to stare at the computer and animate. And then there's a walkthrough from the director. The director will come through the department where they'll look through any changes you've made and any notes that you've had on your work that you've addressed. And then they'll give you tweaks and things like that. So I kind of act as a director throughout the course just to help you where you might be missing some of the pieces within the animation. You're not going to get everything at once, but you'll find that by the time you get to the end of the class, you will have really developed a better understanding of animation. I don't expect you to be perfect. We're getting you to understand how to use a rig and how to animate. So dailies, as you can see, are kind of a constant feedback loop. It allows everyone to stay accountable for their shots and make sure all shots work together seamlessly. There could be 50 to 100 animators working on a film, each having a few shots they're responsible for. Everyone would need to come together to develop how the character moves or how they express themselves. So this allows everyone to share in the development of the story and stay true to the characters that they're animating. All right, so previously they called these shots briefings, but the more common term is dailies. All right, I just realized that I forgot to ask if you can hear the audio on these videos. Please let me know if you can't, and I'll see what I can do to fix that. I hope you can hear it though. So as you can see, you're always developing what you have in an animation, and the dailies help you push past what your original thoughts were. The director and your peers help you stay true to the character's personality and motivations. You could nail your animation in one shot, or it could take many passes, and it's typically the latter. So next up, we have animation lessons from a DreamWorks animator, and I have 2 slides with these lessons from JP Sands, who is a supervising animator at DreamWorks Animation. So we'll go ahead and listen to what he has to say, and I'll let you know how this ties into the class. Okay, so in this class, we'll start by getting our characters moving. We'll learn some of the fundamentals of animation, and then we'll go into adding appeal. He had a great point about using the rig, but making your character feel like a different character. And you would do this by thinking about who your character is. What are their motivations? What animation choices or acting choices will you make to represent your character's thinking and motivations? So this is the layout of the class. Even though you won't be having large scenes you'll be animating, you'll be working on walk cycles and then eventually adding appeal to your walk cycle. So getting it moving is what we'll be doing in the first couple of walk cycles, and then in week 3 we'll do a little bit more acting choices, motivations by adding appeal. And then week 4 we kind of dive back into just getting it moving again. But all of the knowledge that you found from week 1 through 3 will help you because the run cycle is a lot more difficult. You have to feel more confident when you're working on a run cycle. So here are your takeaways, and you'll take a screen capture of this screen and add it along with your history of animation takeaway screen to the live lecture assignment along with your own personal takeaways. So you'll write a couple sentences saying what you took away from the lectures. So let's go through these. These are the takeaways that I believe you should find throughout this lecture. You should have a clear understanding of what an animator does in their day-to-day. From what we've seen so far, we know they participate in dailies or feedback sessions with the director, leads, and peers. They create their own reference or find their own reference or work with peers to create reference. Obviously, they animate, and this could be in Maya or the studio's proprietary software or other 3D animation programs. They utilize the graph editor to help polish their animations. They act or utilize their knowledge to make their character act in a scene. Finally, they make animation choices and they give the director multiple choices to choose from sometimes. In this class, we'll be going from getting our character to move to making choices and adding appeal to our character's walk. Next, we'll be going into the common paths an animator could take, what an NDA or non-disclosure agreement is, and how that might affect your film or game credits. And finally, we'll go into why an animator is always learning. So if you haven't yet, go ahead and take a screen capture of this screen so you'll have it available for your live lecture assignment due tomorrow. All right, let's go ahead and move on. Next up, we're going to discuss different paths you could take as an animator. First up, we have film animation. This could be live action or animated films. You would work as a large team of animators, but may only have a few short scenes that you work on. And we saw before, you'll work with peers, directors, and leads to make sure the scenes integrate seamlessly through the acting and the choices that you made and your peers made. So several people might be animating the same character, and they have to look like the same character throughout the film. Next, we have game animation, which is kind of the animation focus within this class. We focus on cycles for this type of animation. So you'd create a bunch of different cycles, and then development team or coders would tell the game when to utilize these animations based on where the player is at in the game, what choices they made, and what buttons they pushed. Typically, you would be animating non-human characters or creatures because in games, motion capture is usually taking care of the human characters. And we'll talk about that next. In both films and games, you would capture motion capture data, and an animator would typically clean this data up to make a perfected animation. So in games, mocap could be used in game cycles or within the cinematics or cutscenes throughout the game. You'll notice up here, this is probably kind of like a software program like Motion Builder where they captured all that data. So they would use this data. They probably sometimes they import this data, say within Maya, and then they onto a character, and then they can clean up whatever animation that is. Okay, let's get back to, that was a good one. Trying to find somebody that has, yeah, you can see all those markers. So as you can see in this bottom clip down here on the right, he has a lot more facial markers than, say, if we go back up here. They just had body markers. You're capturing a lot more information within film because they have a lot more detail that they're trying to encompass within that film. So he has a lot of facial markers and he has mostly body markers. Sometimes they'll capture those facial expressions with cameras and things for the animator to animate within games for their cinematics. So data cleanup will be pretty much the same for both of these, and that is actually something that you could go into as once you are finished with your degree. Then we have crowd animation, which could be used in films or games, and you'll have a few different cycle animations that's implemented within the crowd. It reduces the complexity by not having to animate every single character within a crowd. It can be done for animals, humans, and creatures, and it utilizes procedural animation and variations to make it feel like there's a lot more differences throughout the crowd. And you'll actually have, if you go into animation, have a crowd animation course. So that'll be fun. So next we have another lesson from JP Sands. Okay, so when you go out into whichever studio you end up working for, you'll sign an NDA or non-disclosure agreement. Typically doesn't matter how small the studio is, you're going to sign some sort of non-disclosure agreement. So, for example, he had 3 films shelved. He can't discuss those because of the NDA that he signed. You typically won't discuss any of your work until the film has released or you're given permission. A great example of this is how the Marvel films are released, and everyone has to wait a certain amount of time before sharing behind-the-scenes images and video, so they won't spoil the film for moviegoers. You won't receive a credit for your work if the film is shelved, and you wouldn't be able to put that animation work on your reel. So this is why networking in this field is so important. This might be where your next job or work would come from, because you would have nothing you could show. You would need to have somebody vouch for you. In another part of this interview, he says that even though these projects were shelved, he was always learning and animating, and he still learned a lot on the projects. And that leads us into our next couple of slides, how animators are always learning. Walt Stanchfield was a Walt Disney animator, and he also mentored Disney animators. He wrote a book called Drawn to Life, which is available on O'Reilly Books. And in it, he says, the broader your worldview, the more all-encompassing will be your contribution. So what does that mean? Well, if we look at these 2 examples at the bottom, a lot of research went into both of these films. For Coco, the team went to Mexico and actually went into the homes of families and learned about their traditions. These aren't based on assumptions, they actually experienced their way of living. They respected the culture and learned from people that could actually teach them how to respect the culture. So in Ratatouille, one of the most difficult things for the team to do was make CG food that looked delicious. So they had chefs come in and consult. and the animation team took culinary classes to better understand the workings of a professional kitchen. Learning and not making assumptions can make you a stronger animator. So the next slide is what we'll leave you with. It's a passage from Drawn to Life from Walt Stanchfield about who an animator is. We're all beautiful people, but all strange in some ways. We all have psychological quirks that whisk us through life, along many paths that often are not really of our own choosing. Why do we choose art for a career? Certainly not because we're good at it. If we're good at it, we wouldn't have to struggle so hard to make a go of it. But we plug along, each at our own pace. Some eager and industrious in improving ourselves. Some of us sit back and wait for the light to come on. Some of us are driven by some invisible urge to create. Others need some project imposed on us from outside to stir us into action. Animation has a unique requirement, and that its rewards are vaguely rewarding and at the same time frustrating. We're performers, but our audience is hidden from us. We're actors, but there's no applause. We're artists, but our works are not framed and hung on walls for friends to see. We're sensitive people whose sensibility is judged across the world in dingy theaters by a sometimes popcorn-eating audience. Yet, we're called upon day by day to delve deep into our psyche and come up with fresh, creative bits of entertaining fare. That requires a special kind of discipline and devotion and enthusiasm. Our inner dialogue must be amply peppered with encouraging argument. We sometimes have to invent or create an audience in our minds to draw for. Our fellow artists only partially serve us in that respect. We go to them for criticism, not for praise. The directors are necessarily merciless. We at times almost connive rather than create to get a scene by them. He goes on to say, well, we do have an audience out there. We'll be denied the applause, but at least there is a potential audience to perform for, one to keep in mind constantly as we shape up day by day our year dress rehearsal, even as we struggle with the myriad difficulties of finalizing a picture. What is that phrase? Getting it in the can? We can perform each act for that invisible or mystical audience. We can't see our audience, but it is real, and it is something to work for. I felt this really summed up animation well and why you might choose animation as your role. If you find yourself incredibly enthusiastic about this role, you might be an animator. It's a challenge, but it's rewarding once your scene is approved and it's played on the big screen. The more you learn, the easier it becomes. You have moments of being by yourself and working with peers to capture your character. For me, it's that aha moment when you see the characters start to come to life and they begin to have a personality. So with that, if you have any questions for me tonight, I'll stay on for until 6:50, so then I can get prepared for my next lecture. But just drop them in the chat and I'd love to answer whatever questions you might have. Just a few more minutes to go. If you can't think of any questions now, then you know where to find me on Discord. A private message, direct message on Discord is the best way to get a question to me. I have it on my phone. It's just easier for me to reply that way. So if you think of anything after this lesson that you might have a question about and it's just not coming to you now, go ahead and drop it in Discord and I'd love to answer them. All right, so we have about a minute left, so I'll just go ahead and wrap this up. I hope you enjoy what you learned throughout the class, and I hope you'll see a progression of how, where you came from at the beginning to really getting a good understanding of how to make a character move by the end of the course. If you have any questions for me at any time, just go ahead and drop them in Discord and I'll answer them for you. So I hope you guys have a good night, and I'll talk to you later.